John?
Less than a flight.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, George.
Hi, George.
Okay, are we ready?
Yep.
Welcome, everyone. This is a special city council meeting being held on August 23rd, 6 o'clock at Centerville City Hall. The main purpose for this meeting, well, really the only purpose is to do a public hearing regarding the state's truth in taxation requirements. And that is when there's a proposed tax increase that the state requires that you have a truth in taxation, and it should be the only item on the agenda. So we're thrilled for the residents that have shown this day and others that might be joining us on Zoom. We want to make sure that we can conduct business by doing a roll call vote, and I'll start on my far left with Councilwoman Meekum.
Meekum present.
Yent's present.
Hurst present.
Summer Hayes present.
McEwen present.
Thank you. All five council members are with us. We want to start this meeting with a word of prayer, and I've asked Councilwoman Meekum to give us that prayer.
Our kind Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this night that we get to meet together on behalf of our city. We ask you to bless us as a council, that we will be able to be guided to make the decisions that are best for our citizens, that we'll be able to work well with the citizens and work well with each other. We ask you to bless our first responders and anyone in our city that may need special attention at this time. And we ask you to bless us with the wisdom and the knowledge that we need to make the important decisions that will affect everyone's lives. I want to say this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilwoman. And after starting with that, let's rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Like I said, this is a truth in taxation, and with that, it's a public hearing as well, too. Before we go to the public hearing part, though, I want to turn it over to our finance director, Nate Blazer, to talk a little bit about the truth in taxation process and also our budget. So that might help you in making your comments if to maybe formulate some other ideas that you might have. So, Nate, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. It's a privilege to be here. This presentation that I have for you tonight is similar to the one that was given end of June. So I apologize for the repeat information. But I also acknowledge that Utah's truth and taxation process can be confusing until you get really familiar with it. Admittedly, it took me some time to fully understand it. So I'm going to do my best to help inform on this process. So as Mayor mentioned, we're here tonight because we have a proposed increase to our property tax revenue, 32.26%. Pursuant to the state code, we're required to adopt a final budget by June 30th of each year, unless we're pursuing the truth in taxation increase, in which case the final decision on the tax rate and the budget must be decided by September 1st. Just to give you a little timeline of how we got here. This process started back in January when the department heads filled out their forms and their budget requests. In February, Brant, myself, and department heads and other staff met together and we reviewed each department's requested budget. Then in March and April, we held, on 2 different nights, we held the budget retreats with City Council, and that was a public meeting. On May 3rd, we had the presentation of the tentative budget and held a public hearing. On June 7th, we held a public open house for the the proposed property tax increase, as well as the water rate increase. And then in the city council meeting that night, we had a public hearing on the operational budget as well as the compensation schedule. On June 7th, our council decided to table the vote to the June 21st. And so on June 21st, we again held another public hearing and set the proposed tax rate and scheduled this meeting that's being held tonight. Then last week on August 16th, we held another public open house for the property tax increase. And then here we are tonight for the hearing and the adoption of the final budget. So just to note that, I know the meetings in January and February were internal just with staff, but from March on, all those meetings were public. All right, we're not going to watch this video tonight, but I wanted to note that the Davis County Assessor does a good video and has some good information. So if you go to YouTube and search for the Davis County Assessor, they have some good videos that explain the property tax process. But we're going to go over the information that they provide. All right, so one important thing to note is that when we talk about a property tax increase, we are not talking about your total property tax bill. We are only talking about the Centerville portion. That's the only part that we can control here. Here in Centerville, the Centerville portion of your property tax makes up about 10% of your total property tax bill. So when you look at your property tax bill, this is just a random house in Centerville that I pulled. They don't have the 2022 up on their website yet, so this is 2021 information. But you'll see all these different taxing entities, and each taxing entity has its own tax rate. Now again, the part that we're talking about today, so when you hear the 32% increase, we're just talking about the Centerville City portion, not the total tax bill. All right, so to calculate the amount of property tax that you pay, you simply take the tax rate from the entity and times it by your property's taxable value. This gives you the amount of taxes that you would owe. The tax rate is the same for all properties across the city, but the taxable value can fluctuate from property to property. Okay, so again, I don't think Utah is unique in this process, but it is a little bit different and takes some explaining. So I'm going to do my best to explain how property taxes work in Utah. So in Utah, the property tax rates are based on the actual amount of dollars collected the prior year. So the state law limits the city to receiving the same dollar amount in property taxes as it received the prior year. So we'll get the exact same amount that we received last year, unless, for two reasons. One is the city experiences new growth, and the other would be that City Council enacts the truth in taxation process. Just for your information, for this year, we received $25,145 in new growth. So again, we received the same amount that we received last year, plus this $25,000 of new growth, and that's what the city gets unless we enact the truth in taxation process. All right, so just a few components of our property taxes. The first component is the market value. So each year, Davis County performs an assessment and assigns a value to each property. This value is called the market value, and in Centerville for 2022, the average home's market value is $546,000. Now the taxable value is the value at which your property is taxed. For some properties, the taxable value is the same as the market value. However, in Utah, if your property is a primary residence, then you're given a 45% discount. So if you have an average home that has a market value of $546,000, you get a 45% discount if it's your primary residence. So your taxable value, the value at which you would be taxed, is $300,300. Okay. And then the certified tax rate is the rate at which your property is taxed. This is calculated by the county. They do all the calculations. And the important thing to note about the certified tax rate is that as property values go up, your tax rate goes down. And you'll hear me repeat this a few times tonight, but this is some key information that when your properties go up, as we've seen, that in 2021, the average home in Centerville was $414,000, and this year it's $546,000. Now you'll see that our tax rate from last year has gone down significantly. That our tax rate was 0.001197, and this year it's 0.000943. So because we had that steep increase in property values, our tax rate decreased. And so I think of it like a seesaw, that as one end, as your property values shift, your tax rate is going to do the opposite. So as our property value went up, our tax rate went down, but the amount of revenue that the city gets stays the same unless we have the new growth or we go through truth and taxation. All right, so this is a chart showing a history of Centerville's tax rate. Let me try to use this. So you can see that from 1997, which is the earliest tax rate information I could get, from 1997 to about the mid-2000s, property values didn't fluctuate too much, and we know this because our tax rate stayed fairly steady. Because again, when the values increase, the tax rate decreases, so we see a slight decrease, but it didn't fluctuate much. From about 2005 down to 2008, our home values increased rapidly, and so you see our tax rate decrease rapidly. Now we know in 2008, the housing bubble burst, and home prices declined, which brought our tax rate back up a little bit. They stayed about the same until 2017. This jump here is because the city went through the truth and taxation process and did an increase, so that brought our tax rate up here. Again, home values continued to rise, so that's why you see this decline in our tax rate. Until 2021, we had a small rate increase. We went through the truth and taxation process, so you see this small increase. And then this year, we've had a steep rise in our property values, and so you see this steep decline in our tax rate. Now this red mark that I put here is what's being proposed tonight. So if we just went by the certified tax rate that the county gave us, this is where we'd be at. If this passes tonight, then our chart would look like this. All right. Just for way of information, this is a comparison of Davis County cities. The cities with an asterisk are other cities that are going through the truth and taxation process this year. So 8 of the 15 cities are going through the same process that we're going through tonight. I checked this morning, and the only cities that have entered their final information of those that are going through the truth and taxation is Fruit Heights, Sunset, and Woods Cross. So those 3 are final. The others are still pending, so this chart could fluctuate as they go through. But assuming that the other cities pass their proposed rates, Centerville would be the 9th highest out of the 15 cities. So we're in the bottom half of comparing to other Davis County cities. All right, so we talked about how property taxes work in Utah. I want to go over some questions that I get asked frequently when it comes to property taxes. So the first is, are property taxes affected by inflation? So often people think that because home values are rising, that the city is just bringing in tons of money because our home values have risen so much lately. But again, as we covered earlier, this is not true because the city gets the same amount of revenue year after year. And so when we experience this high inflation, our tax rate decreases so that we get the same money. with the exception of new growth or the truth in taxation process. So while the city has not received any additional property tax revenue because of the inflation, the cost of providing the services that the city provides has continued to rise, which puts a strain on us financially. All right, so then the other question, once they learn that, that the city gets the same amount year after year, some people see that their property taxes have gone up. That I was talking to someone yesterday that said when they moved here probably about 10 years ago, they were paying this much and now they're paying a little bit more. And so the question is, if the city hasn't raised taxes, then how come my property taxes have gone up? There's two reasons for this. One possible reason is that another taxing entity, such as the school district or the county or the fire district, has gone through this truth in taxation process and raised their rates. That would increase your total property tax bill. The other possible reason is that your property has increased in value more than other properties. So again, when the property value of the city increases, the city's tax rate decreases, which gives the city the same revenue year after year. However, if your property increases at a higher value than the tax rate decreases, you might see a tax increase, but that just means that your neighbor would be paying less. So for example, if you had a home and you did a big addition to your home, that's going to increase your property's value, probably at a rate higher than just the city's average inflation. So you might see a bump in your dollar amount that you pay, but that just means someone else that just had average or below average property value increase, they might be paying a little bit less. But the city as a whole, which is what we're looking at tonight, we would receive the same dollar amount when that happens. So again, someone else's property tax would have been decreased, but the city gets the same amount year after year. All right, so why does Centerville need a tax increase? There are a few reasons. The first is inflationary. The cost of providing these essential services and infrastructure has increased significantly. Just for your information, our property tax dollars are used to maintain critical infrastructure, such as our streets and our parks. It provides our police and our fire services, and again, maintains our parks and cemeteries. So the cost of providing these services has increased significantly, and the city's purchasing power has declined, and so we need more funding to be able to keep up with the inflation and to maintain the same service level that the city has been providing. Another reason we need it is that many of our city's long-term needs have been put off due to lack of funding. We've had some additional staffing requests. We know that our police have requested 2 additional officers that we couldn't fund. Our streets department asked for another 2 employees, which did not get funded as part of this budget. Some of our equipment is aging and needs to be replaced. And then another reason is our technological advances. I know we've made a lot of improvement over the last couple of years getting up to speed technologically. Just in this last year, we've had upgrades to our websites. We've upgraded our record management, our email archive systems. We've had to contract for some cybersecurity. And so as we advance technologically, all these come at a cost. And then another reason is that wages are rising rapidly across the Wasatch Front. Last year in December, we had a large increase to our police officer salary, almost 25% increase across the police department. Our fire department is experiencing the same thing, and the fire assessment increased another 7%. So in order to counteract this proposed increase would provide an additional $550,689 to help fund these essential services. And just a note that of this potential increase, about 91% of it would be accounted for in our public safety. So with the proposed increases to our police department and our fire assessment, of that 550,000, you could tie about 91% to our public safety. All right, another question we get is where the city gets its funds. So looking at the general fund, this just gives you an idea of the different revenue sources that the general fund has. You can see that the city is heavily sales tax reliant. About 44% of our revenue comes from sales tax. And by the way, these are our budgeted revenue amounts for the fiscal year 23 budget. So about 44% is sales tax, where property tax makes up about 21% of our total revenue. Something important to remember is that sales tax is subject to economic shifts. So when the economy is well, sales tax is generally reflects that, and we receive a larger amount of sales tax. But if the economy goes through a recession or a downturn, then we would expect to see less sales tax. So it fluctuates. Whereas property tax is stable, we get the same amount. So it's good to have both. I think Centerville's very lucky that we do have a strong sales tax base, which saves the Centerville residents and the taxpayers because it helps keep their property taxes lower. All right, so we looked at revenues. Now this is looking at expenses. You'll note that, so for every dollar of property tax we get, this is where it goes. So you can see that between police and fire, that's about 41 cents for every dollar we get, or 41% goes to our public safety. You can see that our parks gets another 10 cents for every dollar. Our public works, which is our streets, gets about 16 cents for every dollar. So this is where your money is being spent. Another question that we've gotten is, what is the city doing to reduce the budget or the impacts to its residents? And I want to make a note here that some people think of the city versus the residents. Where I like to think, this is my opinion, I like to think of it, the city is taxpayer funded. The city's funds are the taxpayers' funds. So I don't think there's a separation of city versus resident. This is the residents' money, and they should have an impact and an input of how they want it spent and what their priorities are. But anyway, so some things that we've done to reduce the budget is postponing the hiring of additional staff. I mentioned this earlier, but the police had requested 2 new officers, and the streets also requested 2 new employees, and those have been postponed in this year's budget. They're not part of it. We've also postponed various capital equipment purchases. We reduced the transfer to our capital projects fund. So because of that, we're now using $231,000 out of our fund balance in our capital project fund. Another thing that we're doing is so state law allows our general fund balance to be 35% of revenues. We're still finalizing last year's numbers, but I'm projecting that our fund balance will be in the 20 to 25% range. So we're not maxing out our potential general fund balance. We're keeping it about 20%, which I think is reasonable. All right, and then the big question is, how will this tax increase affect me? So again, the average market value for a Centerville home is $546,000, which means if that property is your residential property, then your taxable value, because we get the 45% discount, so your taxable value drops to $300,300. This means the average home would pay $283.18 in Centerville City property taxes. We are proposing a 32.26% increase, which would raise the average home to pay $374.47. which is an increase of $91.29 a year, or $7.61 per month. In closing, this is just a graph or a chart that we made so that you might be able to compare, see where your house has a market value, and then compare it to the number underneath. That's about how much you would pay an increase per month. All right, so that's everything I had prepared for tonight. Is there any questions or anything I can answer before we turn to the public hearing?
Explain for me, Nate, just so people listening know. Talk to me about rates on residential properties versus commercial properties.
Yeah, so the tax rate stays the same for residential versus commercial. Where you see the difference is in the taxable value of your home. So commercial properties have to pay the entire market value, so they do not get a discount. Now your residential property, again, gets the 45% discount. So again, as you look at this chart, your average home's value is $546,000. Because of that residential discount, you're only paying taxes on $300,300. If you took a commercial property with the same value of $546,000, they would have to pay taxes on that entire $546,000 amount. So they don't get the discount that residents get.
Thank you. I just wanted that to be clear in case anybody has commercial properties as well as residential. Council, any further questions for Nate before we let the public speak?
We've been through it extensively, so.
Okay. All right, thank you, Nate. We appreciate that overview. I hope that that was useful for those of you that were here that maybe didn't understand the process completely. So this is a public hearing matter. That means it will be your opportunity to respond as soon as we open it to the public hearing. So I would look for a motion from council to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing?
Second?
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that means now at this time, you're welcome to come to the mic, those that are here, those, Jennifer will look for me, our city recorder, if we have anybody online commenting. Just, I ask this of you, just for the record, to just give us your name and where you're from, so we have that in the record as well too. And as we go, we're gonna give you the opportunity to just to say who you want, so, because council wants your input. And before I close the public hearing, I'm going to make sure that you've said what you want to say, because if I close the public hearing, we have to open back up for the public speaking. That's just state law. I wish it could just be an open discussion all the time, but that's what the law stating requires of us. So the public hearing is now open for the truth in taxation increase in the fiscal year 2023 final budget. Just come to the mic and like say your name and where you're from.
My name is Chuck Moulton. I live here in Centerville on 1500 North on Main Street. And I support the increase. I just have a couple of questions. One question that I had was there a truth in taxation hearing last year? And I wasn't sure I got the right answer on that one.
Yes, there was.
Okay, thank you. And the second concern that I have, and I want to express appreciation, first of all, to Gina Hurst and to Spencer Summerhays for responding timely and on multiple occasions to the questions that I raised. And I talked to them over the phone and via email, and they were extremely responsive, and I appreciate that very much. And I think I finally understand how the fact that when the appraised value goes up, that our taxes as a city stays the same. You still get the same revenues as a city. As an individual resident, that's not necessarily the case, as Nate described to us here just a few minutes ago as well. And I think that's one of the concerns that, at least that I'm seeing and some of my neighbors, is that last year on my Centerville property taxes, they increased 28% because my assessed value went up significantly, even though the rate only went up a minor amount. And then on top of that, we get another 32% this year. And so my question to those of you on the city council is, would we anticipate next year having an additional 30% increase? Because if so, then in 3 years, my Centerville city taxes have doubled. And it's happening at the same time that my county taxes are going up significantly. They've gone up 36% since 2 years ago. That was the questions that I had, and I appreciate your input and your service and your taking time with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck, appreciate it. We're making note of these questions, and we'll try and answer them all for people as we get to the end, either a council member or staff. Next.
Thank you for your time. My name is Donald Olson, O-L-S-E-N. I live on 440 East, 475 South in Centerville. We've lived in Centerville for 43, 44 years. So we've seen our taxes go up considerably.
And that long, probably so, yeah.
Yes.
That's commendable, you've been here that long.
They have gone up. Now, I was really rather shocked when I saw the notice that came out from the Davis County Auditor's Office, Clerk's Office. And I went down through it and I looked at what the city was getting from what they had the previous year, from $287. Now, with this 32% increase, would be $451. And then after reading the mayor's comments about that it seems to be a sign, since there weren't very many people show up, it seems to be a sign that we're accepting of this higher rate. And I think that is not a good assumption to make. I can see you making that, but I would hope you could get greater input from the public, and a lot of that's our own responsibility. I understand that. But it still was a shock to me. And if you're saying little or no involvement is a strong sign that you accept what is being proposed, that's your words, Mayor. I disagree, because it affects us. We're on more of a limited income as a retired family, and to have it go up so dramatically, it just really hurts. I'd like to see it go up slower, and because it's hitting us pretty hard. It's almost $1,000 increase, $900 increase.
Excuse me, tell me again what it was last year and what it will be this year.
451 this year and 287 last year, is that correct?
That doesn't make sense on the 30.
Yes, it was 287.04.
Expect the 900 is his total
287.
tax.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about my total
Yeah,
increase.
you're probably talking about
I'm
total
sorry,
on $1,000.
I thought I did that to,
Okay.
Okay, you scared me. I told him I
Yeah, I pulled my
I'm like, wait a
calculator
minute,
out.
wait a minute.
well, at least I got your attention,
You
didn't I?
did, you scared me.
Okay.
Did I get that
Sorry
right,
about
though?
that, but
Donald, did I get that number right on the Centerville portion for you? 451 and 287?
yes, it's 451.98.
Yeah.
It went from 287.04 to 451.98. So anyway, I listened to the explanation. I understand most of it. The part I don't think I understood very well is if your property increased in value at such a rate that was higher than the decrease in value of the city. Is that what you said? Is that what was said? Then you have a different, you're going to pay more? Am I understanding that correctly?
All things being equal, assuming you didn't improve your home, and I'm going to defer to staff to make sure I state this correctly, but all things being equal, if the value of your home increases, but there is not a truth in taxation hearing, your property tax amount will stay the same. Therefore, your property tax rate will decrease. Nate, did I?
So
All things being equal.
We'll address that question when the public hearing closes. We can.
Because after my friend here spoke too, I think you're getting people that where their values increased a lot more than they even thought they would, and we're ending up paying more. So maybe it's those people that have had those big increases in the value of their property that are making up for those that don't. And you just get the same amount, presumably. And it's hard for me to believe you just get the same amount when I see that kind of an increase on mine. I did put together kind of a little emotional statement. and I know that you can explain most of it away, but when we're facing a 40-year high in inflation, and then you go ahead and approve a 35% tax increase. And we understand that the costs of the city are rising. However, it seems like, at least from my point of view, looking at mine, I would think you're getting a windfall. But I don't understand it completely. And most of us, many residents, are having to cut back in what they spend money on and get through with just the necessities. And I would hope that that is the case, that wants are considered only to be at a modest level during this time when the economy when we're experiencing so much inflation.
I didn't understand that comment.
What I'm saying is this. The mayor spoke in his newsletter, and he described that we want to do the basic necessities. But wants are wants, and so those need to be prioritized. But I'm suggesting that because individuals and families are having to cut back on their wants at this period of time, that the city hopefully is taking up that kind of mindset, realizing there are a lot of people that are struggling. That's what I'm saying. I also think on the water rate increase, hopefully people will use less water, so then you don't get as much revenue. So yeah, you can have an increase, but why is it 30%? Why isn't it 10%? Okay, that's the extent of my statement.
Thank you, Don.
You're sure welcome.
Appreciate it. We're making these notes. Thank you. Others?
My name is Dick Leonard, and I live in the cul-de-sac. Got to take these things off so I can see you. And I live in the cul-de-sac just behind Dick's Market. I think the needs of the city are great. The two needs that I see are public safety and streets. We need them both. Understand what you're trying to do. And as the city, just the city, I don't have any problem with that. But when you take the cities and add it to the other 6 entities that are going through the same process right now, then the impact becomes significant. And out of the other entities, I notice on my property tax, there are 17 different entities that make up that property taxing. If all of those went through this process at the same time, we'd all be broke. Nobody could afford it because well, I shouldn't say nobody. I guess your high rollers could, but the average person like ourselves, we couldn't. So it's a concern. I understand what you're trying to do, and I support it, but it's just one thing to keep, I think, to keep in mind. The other thing I was wondering about, in the demonstration, mentioned that a large portion of the city's budget is sales tax. Okay, my question is, I noticed that there's a municipal, it's called on our utility bills, municipal meaning Centerville, Bountiful, et cetera. There is a tax rate there for municipal for power, gas, telephone, and the internet. Are those rates going to be going up? If they're going to be going up along with the other, then that's quite a big, plus the water tax increase that was mentioned, that's quite a hit in 1 year. And maybe that could be spread out. I don't know. But I was just wondering about that, and I noticed that. But that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Others?
Hello. Good to be with you tonight. My name is Luann Hudson, and I live in Centerville and have done so for just about 30 years. I live along Frontage Road, almost to Farmington. And the thing that I would like to mention, and I'm sure you've thought of this, is the topic of homelessness. And it's something that you can't spend a day without seeing, either on the news or if you drive into Salt Lake City. Certainly, we're not suffering as badly as some of our other cities, but the ability to own a home has gone out of reach. The American dream. I'm an old gal, and since I was little, that was part of the American dream. I'm very fortunate that I've been able to have good jobs, and I had parents who gave me some money so that I was able to purchase a home after a divorce and raise my 2 little daughters and have them go to Reading Elementary. But the thing that just breaks my heart is that I see people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s that are destined to a life of renting. And even rent is sky high. So what comes after rent? You move in with mom and dad? That's not a good idea. Sometimes it works. Often it's very destructive on the beautiful relationships. So I just mention these things. I know that's on your mind, but I want you to know that's on our minds too. Home ownership. So I just leave you with this question. What else could you do? What else could the city do besides raising property taxes? Mine generally are going to go up $100 a month. I've retired twice now. I'm now job hunting for reasons that have already been stated. Just the cost of living of everything is going up. And so I'm going to go do my best to go back to work. The options for an old gal like me are limited. But I believe in paying your bills, and I'll do it. I'll step up and do it. But another $100 a month, $1,200 a year, it counts. And I hate to see people lose their homes. I think I'm going to be okay. But I care, and I know you do too. We need to care about our society in general. Please keep that uppermost in your thoughts. What else could you do besides raise our property taxes 32%, and on the heels of a large increase just recently in past years. Thank you.
Thank you. Others that are present? Oh, come on up.
My name is Kevin Samuelson, live in Centerville. I just live on Bradley Drive west of the junior high school. That's where I live. And I just had a question on, with looking at my tax bill. I was, very much dismayed, of course, probably like a lot of people, about their taxes going up like they have. And I'm just wondering, I understand where the 32% comes in as far as the math here, but in my column, I'm looking at my 2021, what I actually spent in Centerville, in my column, just right here on my tax bill. And then I'm comparing it with this proposed tax bill. It's not 32%. It's 43.5% for my calculation on what I spent last year. And I could be wrong, and as far as how this is explained, and that's one of my questions, is how that works, because my tax bill actually went up higher from what I paid last year, and based upon what it says here. That's all I'm calculating that. And I can certainly appreciate, again, what you folks do here for our city, which we all, and I certainly appreciate very, very much what you do. You a lot of times have a thankless job, and I understand that, because you get a lot of heat. But also compliments, I hope, and I compliment on what you're doing too. And what has generally been said tonight is, as far as that increase, I mean, with the current inflation and whatnot, I haven't been able to have a 32% increase in my pay. That hasn't happened, and I'm self-employed, and that just hasn't happened. And I realize that when you make a budget, like I've had on my own personal budget, when I made it towards the end of the year for 2022, that budget has changed a lot, because I haven't been able to do some things because I like to eat and I like to drive my car when I need to go to work, but I've had to curtail the driving part. The eating part I'm still working on. But anyway, so I'm concerned about the increase, realizing I know that we all have pressures that we have to live with, but I know I've had to change my budget personally because of what's going on in the economy, and I hope that there might be some room to make some changes here to make it not quite so stiff, if you will. That's how I look at it. Not others maybe look at it that way, but that's how I've looked at it. So anyway, that's just my comment, and I appreciate your time and the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Kevin, again, your nominal rate changed or at least on the assessed valuation, changed from what percentage was your own calculation there?
From what I paid last year in 2021 to what the 0402, pardon me, from what I paid in 2021 to this year is 43.5%. Not the 32%.
That's just for Centerville City?
Pardon me?
That's
Just Centerville City.
The overall.
Oh, that's the overall.
The overall Centerville, but Centerville City only on that line.
Okay, so that is only the Centerville City.
Your amount from 2021 was?
280, 46, and 402, that's 43.5%, just what I paid. And I don't understand what the 2022, if no budget change, where we get the 32%, the 304, I'm not sure where that number comes from. All I'm looking at is what I actually paid, based upon my taxes here. That's where I'm getting that from.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you.
Is there anybody online that is asking questions or raising a hand? You could continue to come up. I just wanted to if there was anybody online, wanted to give them a chance. Other comments from those that are here? Well, no other comments, nothing else online, then we will try and start answering your questions. Okay, I guess I should look, are you sure you've asked all your questions? Because I need to close the public hearing. Okay, I will look for a motion to close.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the public hearing is now closed. Let's try between council members and staff to answer those questions. I don't want to necessarily answer all of them, but I'll fill in if there's something that we haven't answered. But I still do want to respond to what was in the mayor's comments, okay? You also need to remember that in there, I also tried to give some good background of what's going on, that there was a 40% increase in police wages in Salt Lake City, which cities close to Salt Lake needed to respond to, and practically every city did. And we had a 25% increase in December that the council voted in for public safety increase. And Nate talked about that a big portion of his budget was public safety increase, okay? The other thing that you forgot to mention is, yes, I do spend some sleepless nights worrying about those that are on a fixed income, and it could be difficult. Even though it's around $8 a month, $8 a month is meaningful to some people, and I get that. And so I mentioned those things as well too. I don't take this, because the public didn't show, as a lack of non-caring by the public, but I do take it as some indication that, and I realize that we may not be able to get the word out as well as we should, but we have had 2 open houses, as Nate mentioned. We had one last week and before. And fortunately, as Chuck mentioned, he responded, and he sent emails out, and I'm glad to hear that council responded to him. I sent you one back too, Chuck, but I said that I'm not voting here unless I'm breaking the tie, so I wanted you to get to the council members as well too. So that's the first thing I'll respond to directly. What I put in my letter. There's other things, council, staff. Do you have other things that you want to respond to before I go to others? So I'm not doing all the talking.
Mr. Mayor, I'll address potentially Mr. Olson Samuelson's situation with their tax bill. To kind of put a little bit in perspective, so if we collect $1 million a year in revenue for property taxes, we increase it 32%, we would be collecting $1.3 million. So we just submit that number to the county and saying, this is what we want to collect, is this number. Now, those are not the numbers we have down here. I'm just trying to simplify it a little bit. But the difference is where you're seeing potentially a 50, what math did you do?
On Kevin's, it was
Olson's?
43.5, and on Don's, it was, I think, 57 or so.
Yeah, 57. So but see, that's where the county, we just submit how much money we'd like to collect. The county goes through their analysis to determine, you correct me, Nate, if I'm wrong on any of this, they do their analysis using your assessed value and spreading out that $1.3 million to the residents within Centerville. Now, when they do the assessment of your home, your assessment could have gone up a lot higher. What we're seeing this year, particularly on property tax bills, is the assessment went up drastically for everybody. And so there's some corrections going on there. And so your increase probably, or your assessed value might have gone up higher than your neighbors. And so we're looking at a 32% on average, but it's going to be higher and lower for some. Nate, you can correct me if I'm wrong on some of that.
Yeah, no, you're correct. The 2 important things to remember is that this 32% increase is to the certified tax rate that the county gave us this year. So last year, our tax rate, let me pull this up.
1197.
Yeah, so last year, the tax rate was 0.001197. This year, the rate given to us by the county through the process that Brand explained is 0.000943.
And it's important to note that that is pre-hearing tonight.
Right. So that's the tax rate that the county gives to us, and then they give us the same amount that we received last year plus the 25,000. So that's about 1.7 million is what the county says you're going to receive in property tax this year. Now, when we say we need this increase, the 32% increase is on top of this 2022 certified tax rate that the county gave us. So we can't really look at the dollar amount that we paid last year versus this year. This is where the 32% increase is coming from, is that on top, we're increasing the tax rate from 943 by 32%. Does that make sense?
And the county at that point goes through their formula to determine how that impacts your individual homes. Now, you, as a property owner, can challenge the assessed value, right? I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about that, Nate, and say, no, my market value is not that, and here's why.
Thank you, because I was going to get that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Know
I
what the
forgot to
cutoff
mention
date
that.
is for
So
contesting it?
Say again?
September or something.
Cutoff date for contesting it?
I don't know that. So again, the county assessor's office is in
Should be on
charge.
their bill. September
Thank you.
15th, that's what, yeah. I just remember that by tax deadline, so, other taxes.
Yeah, so that whole assessment process is done by the county. The city doesn't have anything to do with it. So if on your tax notice, if you're looking at your value and you think that, there's no way that your home is worth that much, there is a process. You need to contact the Davis County Assessor's Office and go through their appeal process. I'm not overly familiar with it, but in a nutshell, they come out and look at your property, do an assessment on it, and then make an adjustment if necessary.
And I will say that in Chuck's case, he may go through that process, because as we interacted via email and on the phone, his valuation adjustments were much different in 2021 and 22 than mine were. So my valuation increased by about 6.5% from 2020 to 2021, and then from 2021 to 2022, 27.5%, where his were markedly different. And I can't answer why the county has valued that, and so Chuck did the legwork and contacted the county directly and went through that process. I'm not sure if he got the answer to his satisfaction, but at least he got an answer to that question. So when I look at my personal assessment, it is 32.7% increase on the nominal amount from year over year, because I'm saying all things being equal, generally.
Hopefully this won't get more confusing. I have an example that I created.
And I say that, Nate, only because, again, to further the point from what Branton Mayor is saying, is if somebody has a concern about their valuation increase, that's when you contest it with the county.
Right.
And it's based off the assessor's value, which may not be consistent with the market value that you see on Zillow, right? So it's not your market value, but it's actually the assessed value, which tends to be less than that of the fair market value that you could possibly sell your home for.
Right. And if it's over what you believe the fair market value is, then I would suggest contact the county and go through that appeals process.
Right.
But to help explain, in the case of Mr. Olson and Mr. Samuelson, if they're seeing an above average increase, so last year the average home in Centerville was $414,000. This year it's $536, I think it was.
546.
546, thank you. So call it about a 25% increase across the whole city. If you're paying more than that, it would be due to your home appreciating at a value faster than that 25%. So if that's the case, if your property appreciates at that rate, you might pay more, but that means someone who appreciated less than 25% would actually be paying less on their taxes. But at a city level, we get the same amount. So to help illustrate this, and hopefully this helps and doesn't make it more confusing, we have this example. We'll call it a two-house city. So in year one, here were their values. The tax rate is the same for everybody. So you take your taxable value, you multiply it by your tax rate, and that gives you the amount you pay in taxes. Now you can see from year one going into year two, House number one's value went from 100,000 to 150,000. So their value went up 50%. Where house two went from a value of 150,000 to now it's 300,000. So their home value doubled year over year. So you can see that because house one, their value or their home appreciated less than the city average, they actually pay less than what they paid last year.
And for the public's benefit, Nate, the important number to look at is the $299 number, which you're going to get to, because that stays fixed. Because in this case, there would not have been a truth in taxation hearing in the two-house city that you're illustrating.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So house number one, because it appreciated at a rate slower than the city average, they actually pay less year over year. Where house number two, it appreciated at a higher rate than the city as a whole. So they pay more than they did last year. And that's what I would, without going into detail, that's what I would suspect happened for these two individuals. But again, as Councilman Summerhays mentioned, the revenue that the city sees stays the same. And there's a small difference because of rounding. But again, the city sees the same amount, but homes do fluctuate.
So if you happen to have a house that goes up in value more than your neighbors, that then you're going to see more than the 32% proposed tax increase in what you're showing here with two houses. And I know we have a lot more houses in our city, but it's a great example. There's some towns, I was with mayors from throughout the state yesterday, and there was one mayor that was there with only 35 residents in his town. That might be a two-house city, so.
And it also, the assessment may be delayed, so if you did improvements maybe even 2 or 3 years ago, it could be showing up now with this assessed value because it's delayed, right?
And Brian, you make a good point. You may not have increased value on your assessment just by the market going up. You may have also compounded the valuation going up because you finished a basement, because you did some other improvement to your property.
Or your neighborhood became a more valuable neighborhood.
It's,
are we good on that question? I can help answer a couple other questions unless.
You want to talk about franchise tax?
Yes. So I believe it was Mr. Leonard.
Yes.
He asked about the tax that he sees on his utility bill. Those are called franchise taxes. We see those with your power, your cable television, telephone, your hard lines, not cell phones, but your landlines, and your gas bill. They all have what's called a franchise tax, and the city does not have any control over those. As far as I know, that amount is not increasing. I have not heard of an increase, so those should not be increasing. And in our
And Nate, we might add at that point, it's really gone way down because it used to be on home phones and everybody got it. And it's not on the cell phones like it was on the home phones. So our franchise check taxes has actually gone way down because we don't have the telephones that we used to have. And so, I don't know if someday they'll add them to our cell phones more. There's been talk of them. There is a little bit, but it's nothing like what we were getting. So it would be interesting, I don't think we have it here tonight, what it was 10 years ago to what it is today. But it's actually, the amount coming to the city has changed.
Yeah, we don't see much of a fluctuation between our power and gas because we continue to use power and gas. But as households cut their landline and go to pure cell phone based, once they stop with their landline, then they don't pay that franchise tax on a cell phone. So the city doesn't get that revenue. And the same thing as people cut the cord and go to streaming services. Streaming services don't pay that tax, only cable and satellite television. So you see that our revenue go down there.
And my telephone bill used to be like $89 and now it's $10. And so that's what I'm charged my tax on. because it's bundled in something else.
And so just as a reference, these franchise taxes that we're talking about make up about $980,000 of the city's revenue. So a significant but small, also a small portion of our revenue.
Nate, while you have that pie chart up, this will answer Kevin Samuelson's question too. I've got a lot of this too that, hey, my income hasn't gone up 32%, but you're taxing more than 32%. You're proposing a 32% tax increase. Keep in mind that as a budget as a whole, because we're getting sources from sales tax, other taxes, fines, et cetera, that we are not, our budget as a whole is not going up 32% in the city. It's what, 5%? I'd have to add up those numbers and take it as far as what the budget as a whole is going up. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. Not only are your property tax is not going up 32% from your total property taxes, it's just the city portion, but the city as a whole, we are not jumping our budget up 32% from where we were the prior year.
That's correct. We're just talking about that property tax line. And our total revenues that we budgeted over last year increased 2%.
Total revenues increased 2%? Okay. And in this budget, Nate, sales tax, if I believe right, we have budgeted a $300,000 increase in sales tax. Is that right?
I remember it was 5%.
5%, wasn't it?
5%?
5% over
Okay.
our budget amount last year. I can see if I can do the math in my head real quick.
It was 5% on about 5 million-ish, so about 250,000, it's 260, 70,000.
So we are hoping that on that budget, that comes to pass, that there isn't a recession, and if there was, that those would affect the numbers, months down the road as well too. But so we're doing our best, the staff as a whole and the council, to make sure that we are very careful on our budget as well too.
Mayor, go ahead, Gina.
I was just going to say, I've had a lot of people ask this, and I think it was maybe insinuated a little bit in some of the comments, maybe not directly, but one of the things that people have asked me about is why is the city not using reserve funds to cover this difference? And part of that reason for me is that, back in 2007, 2008, when we had a housing market crash and our sales tax dropped, if you guys saw how much sales tax we rely on to cover a lot of the budget, if the sales tax drops significantly, we would go through the reserve funds so quickly. I think it's important, as people are worried about the recession that's coming, and I am too, but I think we have to recognize and realize that at the end of the day, the city has to plan and prepare. We have to provide drinking water. We have to provide necessities that we all depend on. Public safety is a huge thing. So we did spend into the reserves about, Nate, can you clarify? I think about 25% of the budget shortfall came from reserves, but I am concerned that if we spend any more of that and then do hit a recession and our sales tax drops, that it's not going to take very long before we're going to be, in a concerning situation. So I just want to maybe put that out there too. That's a question that a lot of people have asked, and I think that is something important to talk about.
As far as a percentage, not sure, but we are using this $231,000. That's our dollar amount that we're using.
Responses to other questions, because I have 4 or 5 we haven't addressed yet.
I've got a couple. I'll keep my comments to about 5 minutes, not take too long. First of all, this is a very emotional subject for me. I live here in the old part of Centerville, where there are a lot of retired people that are barely getting along. Last year, we did do a tax increase. I did vote against it We had gotten COVID money, and I felt like, let's see where we end up instead of just upping them. And so I did vote against it last year. This year, in January, we were asked to give our police an increase. I would talk to the police chief quite often, as some of you don't know, but I'm the crossing guard, so he checks in on me. And he was telling me that he was going to the police academy and taking what was left because we couldn't even hire anybody because of our low wages. And then I talked to some of the officers, and they were being offered $5, $6, $7 more to go other places. And I knew after being on the council as long as I have, when we lose an employee and we have to replace them, then we can't replace them. So then we up the wages, and now we have somebody we've got to train, and they're not as good as the person we lost. So I was very strong on keeping our good officers. We have wonderful officers, and they truly care about our town. They work well together. We have an excellent police chief, so I felt strongly that we needed to raise our police wages. I also voted very strongly for our public works, because here again, you've got, everybody's out there vying for employees. If we lose our public works people that are, trained on the backhoes and have those kind of skills, they're needed out in the private sector right now. And so if we lose them, we've got to get somebody from the private sector to come back. We've got to raise our rates to get them. So I let this guy go and I'm paying him here, but I hire the new guy here. It just doesn't make any sense when we have great employees. So that was a hard one for me. But as they said, 91% of our increase is going to our police and our fire departments in order to up their wages.
Let me just do a parenthetical insert. Robin mentions backhoe operators. They are important. But we have very stringent state requirements with regard to sanitation and drinking water. You don't want someone who is inexperienced controlling the amount of chlorine or fluoride or whatever else is happening with your drinking water. And in my mind, that's even more important. Sorry, Robin.
And as Bill says, I was taught by the public works employees that if fluoride is strong enough, if they drop a little bit on the floor, it will eat right through a concrete floor. So you are right. You want somebody with experience. You want somebody that cares, so that we don't end up paying way more in the end and maybe not being safe in our community. So for those reasons, I am, for the increase. Also, George was very strong. He said we need to have some skin in the game. So instead of, to begin with, what staff brought us was what it was going to cost us. They wanted us to raise taxes more than we are. And we decided to take $231,000 out of our reserve to show that we're willing to put some money out there too. Now, hopefully, maybe we'll get some discounts and a few things and it won't cost us quite that much. But on the other hand, if sales tax goes down, it could cost us more than that. But we were willing to. We did take out a lot of the fluff. The police department, which is not fluff, wanted 2 more officers. We had to tell them not this year. Public Works needed more workers. We told them no. They would have really liked, if you notice, there's no beautiful furniture out here in our area. It was only budgeted for $10,000, which on a city is not a big budget, but I'm very tight. I'm very tight at home. If you don't believe me, ask my children. They all order soda pop now because when they were kids, they were never allowed to have a soda pop if we went out to dinner. So they all let me know now that they drink their soda pop when they go out. But I try and look at the budget here like I do at home, that, we do have to cut. When you say inflation is hurting you, if it's hurting your gas, what do you think it's doing to our police officers' gas? I mean, we have no choice if we want to keep things just at an even keel of the amenities that we're taking care of our citizens with when our police gas goes through the ceiling. Because like I said, you think what it does with you. So when Luann asked what else could we do, we pushed really hard. All of us did, but but I can speak for myself. I pushed really hard when they came in with the numbers, and I'm like, nope, I can't vote for that much. So George suggested that we put our skin in the game, and we brought it down to that. We were looking at 35. We took it exactly what we were going to need, so we even brought it down a little more than that. So I feel like we are trying to cut back, and I would definitely not vote for it if I didn't feel like we absolutely needed it. Like I said, most of this is going to wages for our employees, and you know, as we've seen recently, we're not immune to some of the big things that are happening in other cities, and we do want our police officers and our fire department and our water department and our street department to be there when we need them, or it will cost us more in the long run. I think that's if any of you still don't understand the rate, if you contact me or talk to me, I'm very simple-minded, and it took me a long time to figure it out. But I can tell it to you in way simpler. I finally have figured it out, and I can explain to you very simply how it works, because that's kind of how my brain works. But I appreciate you all being here tonight. I think that I'm very sad when the people don't come out. I was sitting in your chairs for a lot of years, so be careful. Look where I ended up, and this is not what I had in my goals or my plans. So I just want you to know that I feel like our council has looked at as many places as we can to cut and still do things that's not going to end up costing us and raising taxes more. And I hope we won't even be looking at this year, but next year, but I don't know.
Nate, can you, are you done? Let me pick up, a couple of questions, Mr. Moulton's maybe. Can you put up the rate chart?
Yeah.
Graph? So the question was asked about an expectation for the future year, and we do not know what is going to happen for us any more than for the city than for ourselves individually. There has been some disagreement within council people over past years about whether the best course was to have a small property tax increase every year to reflect the changes of inflation and little things that happen, or trying to swallow those things and only do a tax increase periodically. Personally, I have been converted, and I believe we should be doing it every year. 2 years ago, we did not have one, and I was in disagreement, but the council determined not to do an increase. Last year, we did a minor increase. This year, we have a significant increase. If you look at the graph, our rate ends up, even with this increase, below the rate in 2018. If we had done an inflationary increase every year, we would have been essentially on a par with that 2018 rate. Which is better? I don't know. I know what I believe. What will we choose to do next year? We'll have to look at the numbers and what has happened to us in the intervening time. But each one of us are living with the same thing that you're living with on tax increases. My personal property tax was $1,197 when I moved to Centerville in 1989. I was over $4,000 last year.
That's his total tax bill.
That's my total.
That's not a city bill.
That's not, you're right, that's.
I just wanted, I don't want to think you live in a $100 million house bill.
That's my total tax bill. So I'm experiencing the same thing you are. Kevin and I work together. I'm in the process of retiring, so I moved from a situation where I can work harder, make more money, do a better job, to a situation where I'm retired as well. So I understand it and I feel it. Unfortunately, each of us is suffering from inflation, and I will tell you that it is my belief that municipal government, city, county, fire district, school district, to some degree suffers from this inflationary cycle more than we do individually, because we don't have the ability to cut back. The comment has been made about needs versus wants. We don't deal with the wants. We postpone the wants until they are absolutely necessary. We force police officers to use the car one more year. But do you really want the police officer coming to help you in a car that he's not willing to depend on getting there? So we feel your pain, and have done everything that we can to try and deal with it. Those are thoughts that I'd share.
Thank you for addressing those couple other questions that I just checked off. Others, 'cause there's a couple more questions left, but Gina, did you have, or Councilwoman Hurst?
I
something you wanna say?
was going to ask you if you'd indulge me in, Mr. Olson asked about the water rate increase, why not 10% instead of 30%? I know this is not a public hearing for that, but if you don't mind, I would like to address that for him. I appreciate that we have public here, and
That's one I
think
had down, so I would love you to address it.
recently, the city completed a water master plan, and when they do that, they look out over 25, 30 years, and they assess and determine what projects are needed to be done. And then they take and prepare a cost estimate for each one of those projects. They've taken each project and said, okay, we need this one in 2025, we need this in 2026, and they kind of just, do a little bit at a time. When they do that, they just have to estimate everything in today's dollars. So that doesn't mean that we won't see another water rate increase, but they've taken that and recently come back to the city council and said we need to raise water rates. So this did come up in council. Why don't we, do a slower increase in that cost? Maybe do 10% this year and 10% next year. Here's why. Those costs continue to go up. Additionally, every year we need improvements to the water system. We have an aging system in many places in the city. The water line break on Chase Lane in January is a perfect example of infrastructure that we have to keep up on. We rely on drinking water. It's an absolute necessity. It's probably the biggest need that we as humans depend upon. So the 35% is representative of that. The water rates were not raised probably on pace as they should have been over the last few years, but that water master plan did show that, and I reviewed that extensively along with my colleagues here. The one thing that I wanted to say about that is that I looked at it from a slightly different perspective. I worked for the Division of Water Resources, and one of the things that the Division of Water Resources does is they fund money for projects for cities that need water improvement projects. And one of the ways that we looked at those loans for entities is we would look at the median adjusted gross income for that city, and then we would say, okay, it needs to be about 1.5% of that median adjusted gross income. Since I've left there, they've changed it to a modified adjusted gross income, and 1.5% exactly lined up with that 35% increase. I know it's not pleasant to get an increase in your water rate like that, but it is absolutely a necessity. And we need to, start building a little bit more of a reserve in our water fund so that we can replace this aging infrastructure and hopefully stay up on it enough that we don't have catastrophic breaks like we did on Chase Lane. We're not going to stop all of those, but let's try and stop as many as we can, because they cost a lot more than just trying to maintain it a little bit more as we go.
And Councilmember Hurst, just to add to that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that also gives us access to state and federal funding because we are now meeting that 1.5%. So
Yeah.
hope would be we do, the city's done a great job at applying for state and federal funds. But being at that 1.5%, the hope would be to eliminate that increase in the future because we'd have access to that funding from the
Yeah.
state and the federal government. So.
And it will help us to put a little bit in a reserve fund too. For example, we've got this potential grant to replace the green steel tank. That's an amazing grant, but every grant requires that the city put in a chunk of money, and we really don't have quite the reserves we need to meet that and have a little bit of a rainy day fund in case we did have another Chase Lane water break.
And the other thing is, keep in mind, Chase Lane was caused by the failure of some bolts in a valve. And we
Right.
have, I think it's 15 more valves of the same vintage that our people are going through and digging up and replacing so that we don't have another catastrophic break. And that incident alone cost us over $250,000.
Right. So we won't stop every catastrophic break, but in this particular case, I agree with Councilman Ince that, you know, if we can go in and fix some of those things because we have a little bit of extra budget, I think it's important, and I think it saves us long run. We will save more money that way, which means you will have less increases over time. That's
Thank
all,
you.
Mayor.
Councilman Summerhouse, do you have something that looks like?
Yeah, I think that some of the themes that have been brought out tonight, and I'll address just generally the concepts, and that is the theme of why such large increases, and can we spread things out to minimize hits. And I'll just start off by saying that these are not all of Spencer Summerhays' principles of sound financial management, but at least two of them are to be proactive rather than reactive, and secondly, saving for a rainy day. And I really, really appreciate Councilmember Ince's comments that he's more supportive going into the future of really looking at these truth and taxation hearings on an annual basis. So for reference and context, I'll just give you the last 10 years of my personal tax rate changes, and you'll see what a roller coaster ride my personal property taxes have been on, and I would guess that yours are very similar. They may be a little different, we've already talked about that, but going back to from 2013 to 2014, my rate, my property tax amount, not the rate, the tax amount went up 10%, 11% the next year, down 12%, up 44%, down 4%, up 6%, up 1%, up 4%, and now up 32.8%. To me, that just doesn't make sense. And so, again, I appreciate what Bill has said, and in future years as a council, I hope that we'll have a keener eye on a year-over-year basis to account for cost adjustments, whether it be for our salaried staff as well as materials for infrastructure, streets, etc., so that we are being proactive rather than reactive, kicking the can down the road, and all of a sudden we're hit with these huge, large amounts. I understand Councilmember Meekham's approach to, hey, we don't ever want to do this, and that's a good approach, but I think it can't come at the expense of pushing off and making problems worse down the road. I'll also say that in terms of saving for a rainy day, currently, approximately, because it adjusts a little bit, but our unrestricted general fund balance is about $3 million-ish, just under $3 million. It's about 25% of our general fund revenues, which is an important number because the state allows us to save up now up to 35%. And that may sound like a large number, but if you think about our general fund budget on an annual basis, and we take out or divide that by 12 for a monthly amount, we've really only saved up 3 months worth of revenues. So, and I view this as not, in pronoun uses, it's not us versus them, it's not ours versus yours. This is our money. There is no us versus them from a city and a resident perspective. And so, again, another sound financial principle management, in my mind, is that we're looking at our fund balances so that we can take advantage of grants, so that we can protect ourselves from any of these huge hits to us in the future. So I think we need to be cognizant of, yes, we want to have a modest city budget, but we want to have it realistic, and we keep an eye on it year over year as we move forward. So in answer to Mr. Moulton's question, as well as the theme of this, do we anticipate additional increases? Well, do we anticipate increases in pipe costs? Do we anticipate increases in asphalt costs? Yes, we do. Do we need to have salary increases to compensate our employees? Generally, yes. And so hopefully our sales tax amounts, the other question was, how do we minimize these? Hopefully we can be business friendly. We have businesses that generate sales tax dollars that will offset our property tax dollars. We want to encourage that as best as we can. And kudos to the council for the Young Power Sports, which will hopefully bring in a lot of sales tax revenue for us. But those are just generally my thoughts. Hopefully that answers some thematic questions that were raised or concerns that were raised tonight, and also gives broader context to hopefully how we move forward as a council in the future.
There is one other one that we haven't hit, and that's Ms. Hudson's comments about homelessness and home ownership, if I may.
Certainly.
3 years ago, the state of Utah, because of complaints by Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, West Valley, the bigger cities who have big homeless problems, basically mandated a structure where every city, based on population, was assessed an amount into a fund at the state. Do you remember what our number is this year, Brant?
Is it like 40 grand?
He has it.
It's, we pay $3,279 per month.
So about $40,000 a year that we are putting into that fund. We do have a minor homeless situation with people living in vehicles in town. Police are aware of it. They keep an eye on it. They try not to focus or roust those people. They are aware of it, and those people get a certain amount of help. They have more help available in bigger cities. We are very concerned about home ownership. There are different feelings on the council about high-density housing versus single-family homes, condominiums, those kinds of things. We are doing everything that we can to try and improve that. Centerville has been successful from a standpoint of creating a very desirable community. One of the benefits of that is that our personal housing prices have gone very high. One of the costs of that is that new homeowners have a difficult time buying in Centerville. I have 4 children who live in the state. One of my 4 children has been able to afford a house in Centerville. 3 of them are in other locations in Davis County where costs were a little bit lower. I don't know that I want to see us reduce the quality of life and the status that Centerville has. I don't want to freeze anyone out. We try and do everything that we can to make it as effective as possible. I don't know that there's a way. During one of the public hearings, there was actually an offer by some people in the audience that they would like to create a fund and make contributions that the city could then administer and help to offset property taxes for people who are on a fixed income and having difficulties. That becomes very, very difficult and problematic of how do you handle it, who gets the benefit. There are funds at the county to do that, but it's very difficult for us to do that at the city and administer it. And if I were to go around and ask everybody in the room, are we all willing to put an extra 10% of our property tax into a fund to help people who are having a hard time paying their property taxes? I'm sure we would get a variety of answers about how willing people are and what to do with that difficult proposition. So it is very difficult, and property tax have been labeled by some people as being the most punitive tax that there is, because it means that you don't totally own your home. And we're conscious of that, and yet we still will not have a city if we don't have the ability to support the functions that we need. Police, fire, water, which are getting expensive like everything else.
And we could go in a long discussion about home ownership and other factors with interest rates and how an economy is doing. And in some ways, we're a victim of increased home prices because of our economy. It's been, for 5+ years now, one of the top 3 in the nation, you know. So it's flock people here, you know. And the feds, we could discuss policy on keeping interest rates as low as they did, as long as they did as well too. There was one other question we didn't answer. I think Dick Leonard, you mentioned about other taxing entities and what they may do. If you look at your property tax bill, there should be a date of a truth in taxation hearing by anybody that was proposing, any of those 17 entities you mentioned that was proposing on raising taxes. There weren't a lot this year. There were quite a few last year. You had the school district and the county and the fire district, and so and there was some significant increases last year from all those entities. And yes, that can happen. We can't control that when an entity decides to, another entity decides to raise their rates. I mean, that's where we all citizens can go to the school board meeting or the county and talk with them as well too, as far as what they might raise their rates to as well too. So that's the best I can answer that as far as other taxing entities. So
Mayor, I'd like to add.
Yeah, Councilman McEwen, I was just going to come to you because we've gone around the table. Shoot.
So there's been a lot that's been covered, and I think it's been really good. I do want the residents to understand that in the case of at least 3 of the council members who this is our second term, who are responsible for that very first big property and tax increase that you saw, you know, we were looking at a situation of where, frankly, there'd been bad tax policy in the city. We deferred a lot of maintenance. We kept our property taxes artificially low. And as such, we had a situation where we were just not meeting the obligations. And in my opinion, unfortunately, we haven't completely dug our way out of that hole. And as you heard earlier, the discussion about, well, do you incrementally raise the taxes every year? Or do you defer and do this every couple of years and make it a sizable increase? That's a debate we're going to continue to have. But from my perspective as a council member and as a resident, there are some things I wish had been done differently. I wish that we had not been letting our tax rate drop so low and create these situations of where we had our public works director coming to us with a 20-year-old rusted out truck saying, we can't weld this anymore. There were things that we put off that we should have been putting off. And as we want to have a high quality community and we have high expectations of those city services, we need to support the staff and the equipment to provide those services. Will we climb out of that hole? Probably. We're getting closer each year. I feel much better about it now than I did in 2017 when we had to make that first increase. But it's simply, we are a victim of our own success. We've created a great community where people want to live, they have high home values, and there is an expectation that comes along with that. And it is painful. I recognize, and as Robin had mentioned, I said, let's put some skin in the game. We know that there's a recession likely coming. Let's see what we can do to offset this as much as we can, because there are other taxing entities that are going to get in on this. But unfortunately, our scope of control is only what happens inside the borders of Centerville. But I do understand and feel the pain of the cumulative effect of the taxes. It is not uncommon. Tonight is a little different, but we've had in the past individuals in their late 90s who have come in and talked to us about what that $20 will do in terms of their ability to buy medications. It's not a trivial problem. We're very aware of it. But we also can't reduce these basic city services and expect to maintain a quality community. So as much as I've heard tonight from my colleagues, I echo the same sentiments. We are sharpen the pencil as much as we can, and we hope that we sail through without a recession. I think it's going to happen personally, and it's going to be a big effect on us as a community. I hope when we do get to that point, that as Councilman Insa pointed out, if there are people in our community that are struggling, let's do what we can to help them, because they will need our assistance to maintain that same quality of life that we're all enjoying now. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. All right, we've gone around the table. I think we've answered all the questions. Any further comments? But we do have two resolutions here, Council, that we need to get a vote on. Yes.
Just one thing I forgot to add in regards to maybe homeowners that have a difficulty paying. The county does have a program. I think Councilman Ince mentioned it. It's called the Homeowner Low Income Abatement. And again, there are some age and income qualifications, but that's done through the county. So again, I would encourage you, if you have a hard time paying, to contact them. And again, that's called the Homeowner Low Income Abatement.
And someone could call and find out where to go if they need to.
Yes, if you need a copy of this paper that I have here, let me know and I can get it to you.
Another quick thing that I might put out there is, if any of you are thinking of going to the county, one of the best ways is to have a realtor bring you up 3 or 4 comparables to your house. I've helped some people with their property taxes in bygone years that were struggling to get their, thought it was way too high, their assessment. And the best way to work with the county was to have, take a paper in and say, here's my 3 comparables, or here's my 5 comparables, and mine's way high. Or sometimes I've done it for people, and I've said, you better be just really happy with what you've got, because their property was higher rated than they thought it was going to be. So that is an option for you to do, is to check with a realtor, especially if you've got a friend, and ask them to give you a market value of your home to see whether you're in the ballpark.
Thank you. And I did it once, and that was the biggest thing, is having those comps.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Let's, if there's no further discussion, then let's look for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
There's two resolutions. So let's do what the 2022-24 first, Councilwoman.
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-24, which will set the real and personal property tax rate at 0.001247 for the general fund for Centerville City.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Okay, let's start vote on it then. Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. We have, that brings us to the final budget. Nate, is there anything that we need to know on the final budget?
No, there have not been any changes since the June meetings.
Okay, so we need a motion on resolution 2022-25.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2022-25, approving the final budget as previously presented.
Second.
Motion is second, further discussion on that one? Okay, Councilman Ince, we'll go
Aye.
ahead and go to your right.
Aye.
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 And that motion passes 5-0. Okay, I don't think, like we said at the start of this meeting, with truth and taxation, there's nothing else
Can't do anything else.
put on an agenda, so, and I think I got both the motions, so I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
To adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Truth and taxation is adjourned.